Okay, all good.
Hey everyone, welcome to CDS Tentacle, the telemetry session. We'll paste the link in the chat. We'll maybe pin this one. Can you guys see the Etherpad?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, could you make it a little bit bigger, maybe?
Yeah. Good idea, thanks. Is this fine?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, great. So the first topic that we wanted to discuss today was what metrics we need to collect in order to tell whether the deployment is a stretch cluster. And we managed to have Laura and Junior research what would be the right data structure. So we already have answers for that. Basically, there's a flag in the OSD map that we will be collecting, and this should give us the good indication whether the cluster is in stretch mode. And if I remember correctly, we started having this flag scene specific. So we can even backport that to Quincy and collect the data even a couple of releases back. Are there any questions on this topic?
Yeah, one thing I just mentioned, stretch mode and the stretch cluster is a little different. I know we can kind of use it interchangeably, but basically, I think stretch mode, it's its own thing where it only works for like 3 sites, two data sites and one tiebreaker monitor. And yeah, I just want to clarify that because stretch cluster, it could be a stretch cluster without a stretch mode enabled, but then you didn't have certain things like being able to kick off one data center and just use the tiebreaker to distinguish which one they should survive. Yeah, things like that. But yeah, no, I think for stretch mode, you definitely would use that variable, which is exposed in the OSD map, and the telemetry module, which is in the manager module. Basically, you can call an OSD map and grab that variable to verify if it's stretched or not. And yeah, about like positive, false negatives, I think it will take the user, as we have discussed, pretty much a lot of preparation in order to go into stretch mode. You can't just like randomly turn it on because you need to have specify like the correct amount of zones that you want to be used as stretched, and also specify the tiebreaker monitor and everything like that. So a lot of configuration before you could enter the mode. So the user probably won't be able to just stumble upon it randomly. Yeah.
So, Junior, do you think there are any additional pieces of information that we should be collecting?
as far as stretch mode is concerned, nothing that comes to mind that would be too critical for. I mean, we kind of know that in order for like stretch mode it only works on 2 data sites. The amount of monitors in there, I mean, it varies. It could be like 2 on each, could be like 1, but that's not ideal. The number of OSDs, I mean, but then that's pretty general. It's not like, useful for just stretch mode. It's pretty much like user as a whole, like we as a whole wants to know how many OSDs there are in a cluster. Yeah, nothing specifically comes to mind right now.
Okay. So once we have this batch, we can even test that on one of the stretch clusters that you have and see that everything looks right.
Yeah. Or you can, I mean, I don't have a running cluster right now, as in I always use like a vstart. We can expose I mean, we can just spin up a cluster, or locally you could just enter stretch mode as well. I can also help you like navigate through that. But yeah, no, if you really need, I could try to spin up one from the available machines we have. The Giba cluster, we also have that. Something similar. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, I was suggesting just in case there's maybe a cluster that is running for a longer time, and in case it has any history or anything in addition that we might not think about right now. So just in case. But yeah, vstart works. Great. Are there any other comments or questions on this subject?
I guess I can just mention the context behind this a bit more. So this we've been wondering, developers have been wondering, how the adoption of stretch clusters have been going in the wild. And we did ask this question at a user dev meeting where there was several attendees there, and we did like a poll where people could answer. And what we got from that small subset is that not tons of people are using it, but more people are getting interested in it. So that's kind of where this question arose, and why we're interested in specifically collecting data on this, and where telemetry will help in ways that the user dev meeting can't, is that anybody that opts into it, into this collection in the wild, will be able to report that they're using it. And they may not be attending user dev meetings, since those are tend to be the attendees for that tend to be the most vocal users in the community. So this will give us a better snapshot of who all is using stretch mode in the wild, and just give us a better idea of the adoption rate. And we plan, this will be something that, since it was already brought up in the user dev meeting, once we eventually get more metrics on this, we can bring this up again and show the community what we've done to gather this data.
Thanks, Laura, for the background. It's a great segue for the next topic that we want to discuss. So, are there any other collections that we want to add? Any questions that you have that you want to have more observability on usage of other features, or anything that comes to mind that we're not necessarily collecting right now? So we wanted to open this discussion to everyone. Hi, Gaurav. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, I've actually added a similar topic for our Wednesday's user plus dev meeting. Just I can just share a brief about what I'm planning to discuss there as well from usability aspect, and it's like want to brainstorm more on that topic where right now in the dashboard we have an overview about various pools, but we don't have an overview from an application perspective. We don't have a grouping for, so for example, for users who are not, I'll say from an admin perspective, they are not very much skilled in Ceph. From an admin perspective, they don't know about the internals of Ceph. If a user just wants to understand how much usage their applications are having, for example, RBD, RGW, and CephFS, and having an additional overview from an application side. It's like um, yeah. So having an overview from an application side where we open a dashboard, we see three panels: RBD, RGW, and CFFS. How much is the actual utilization? Not taking the replication factor into account. I think planned. I think what I thought of it as that per pool we can fix that every pool should have a unique application. Right now, when we enable the application, we can have the same application name for tens of pools. Um, in order to have a proper grouping based on the application, I think part of the larger discussion is how in order to understand how this is achievable, I think would be I would propose that we should have a unique application per pool. That way, let's say, for example, RBD based application with a replica of 3. So, for example, if it's using 100 GB, but if we actually want to show the usage, it would be 300, right? From Ceph perspective, making a replication factor of 3 into account. But to a user, only 100 GB is used, right? If a user doesn't understand replication, I mean, the user would still need to go into detail from Ceph perspective, but a user just wants an overview from an application side that 100 GB is the usage that my application has. It doesn't. On storage cluster, it would be using 300 GB, but actual application data is still 100. So I think having those 3 panels and then they can dive into detail into the pool level metrics that they want to have. I think something which can make users' life easy. Or let's say if a CTO of a company, or let's say if an executive who doesn't know Ceph but wants to understand how much is the utilization, I think that could simplify storage for users who don't actually know Ceph. So that is one of the proposed idea thoughts that I had.
So this is something that at the end of the day we would have both on the dashboard, and the idea is also to collect that with telemetry. And so just to make sure I understand, there's no currently no one is working on grouping that on Ceph side.
No, as far as I understand, haven't heard this. If anyone is already working on that, it would be great to know and share ideas with them. I think it's more like an aggregation of metrics at an application level for simplification of understanding for users, for any users who don't know Ceph initially, because we may have some users in the community or some members in the community who are still learning Ceph. And then they can dive into further detailed metrics and usage. once they understand Ceph DF, overall Ceph cluster utilization, how Ceph. I think I understand that this can have complexities when EC is involved, and that's why I thought about that, and I thought that's why we should have a unique application there, because even usage can vary based on replication factor or EC profile factor from Ceph side. Right.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah. Does anyone have ideas if, for EC, how would we calculate that?
So it sounds like some of this information is already available as part of CEFDF. If I don't know whether we are capturing it by means of telemetry or exposing it via telemetry. I guess going back to where it started off, Gaurav, what question are you trying to answer in terms of like what what is the customer or a client or a user not understanding currently, in terms of, I understand like they don't understand the construct of pools. They probably understand volumes more than pools, right? So I guess what you're trying to say is the abstraction at which the customer, like the end user understands the application. That's what you want to expose rather than just pool level like fullness and things like that, right? Because
Right.
there's
Yeah.
there's the raw usage and there's total usage. So are they trying to plan for capacity, or they're trying to do something else? Because if they're trying to plan for capacity, they better know that they have to plan for application or EC and things like that, right? Or if they're just trying to say that, okay, this is the usage over time overall for my application, then it's separate, separate thing to collect, right?
Right. I think a simplistic overview will be a user is trying to understand the capacity, and they are trying to understand how much is the capacity based on the application, uh, and how much is the usage and how much it's left,
Yeah,
without taking.
in that case, you do need total capacity, right? You would account for application in that case, because if they have to add storage, they have to account for replication or EC. As far as the question about how that is derived for EC is, it's a totally different game, right? You have shards and you have padding and you have to do other things like that. So it becomes more complicated to explain to the user in that sense. So in that sense, it's probably easier for them to see total than to see like per shard usage.
So let's maybe consider a small example where we have two types of applications. One is consuming block and one is consuming file. I think in terms of scaling, the user would need to understand the total capacity where, say, I think I'm 100% understand your point there. But if they just want to understand that the application is actually consuming 100, not 300, I think when it comes to scaling, they can deep dive into more detailed
Right. So
usage.
right.
Yeah.
So in your example, it's basically like, for example, you said RP, like block and RGW, right? So all the RGW pools will probably have an application associated with them, which is RGW. And now you want to see that, okay, overall, have these pools grown in terms of metadata plus data usage across time? Because they don't care about the block as much in terms of scaling. So yeah, that's a good question to ask, like even for like the RBD and RGW and SFFS developers, to see if they have any kind of aggregation at the client side. If not, it's probably something we have to do at the server side, because the server has the pool level information, right?
Yep. And I was actually looking at the PR where we introduced application, right, at pool level. I was just trying to understand why we introduced application. And apart from basic application like RGW, RBD, and CephFS, let's say if a user is using tiering, so when they're consuming, let's say fast devices, and let's say RBD is, let's say the user is running MongoDB on RBD, and they're consuming faster devices. So they would be just concerned about how much they are actually consuming at a high level, application level. And then when they further want to deep dive into it, they would understand in terms of that. I think I'm circling back to the original thought here, just to make usage easy to understand for folks who are not well versed with Ceph, just have a basic knowledge.
Yeah, I think as far as your original question about why application was introduced, my recollection is that it's just an abstraction in terms of easily applying caps for separate daemons. And they also sometimes also used to set up pools in a certain way. Um, for example, metadata pools have some different kind of scaling settings for autoscaler, even recovery priority. Earlier it used to be used. So just to identify that, hey, this is an RGW pool plus, there are other things that we also derive in terms of metadata versus data pools, and then just set up pool in a way that is just easy to use. There may have been other reasons that I don't remember now, but I think let's take this topic to the user dev meeting. It would be better to have some, CephFS, RBD, and RGW developers to also chime in as to what makes sense, right? It needs to be something that users even relate with.
Yep, sure, definitely. I have some diagrams I'll show over there that I was using whiteboard, pen and paper, just for a simplicity. I'll showcase those diagrams there in the user plus dev meeting, and we'll discuss this more into detail in that forum. But thanks for
Great.
the feedback.
Thank you.
We have a message in the chat. Spencer, maybe you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was just agreeing with what was said. I manage quite a few customers clusters now, and a lot of the less technical Ceph people tend to struggle with the concept of where their storage actually is. So a concise, like, here's your application and how much storage it's using across all pools, all tiers, metadata included, tends to get them to understand better for capacity management. So it makes a lot of sense to me from a user's perspective anyways.
Yep. And do you use the application flag for each pool, or?
Yeah, it's usually the only real way to filter it properly. So when I'm creating those scripts, I just use the application flag.
And do you break it down by replicated data as well, or it's just all together?
Yeah, it's usually after replication REC is factored in. If you do before those factors, most people's capacity management, they can't think in that terms particularly well. To keep in mind that they need to calculate that. So I just present it as a single value with pre-calculated replication factored in.
Got it. Okay, so it seems like we'll continue this discussion in the next user dev meeting. So if you can join that meeting too, that'll be helpful to have another more feedback on this topic.
For sure.
Thanks. Thanks, Gaurav, for bringing this up. So let's see what conclusions we have in the next meeting and see exactly what we can have, which design-wise should be something that telemetry can just pick and collect specific set of metrics that can be used also by the dashboard. So we don't want to replicate work here. So we can think about that next. So curious if any other ideas for other collections that you'd like to see. So let's say you go to the public dashboards and you really want to know anything about a feature that you're developing, or have some more transparency about deployment in the wild.
Maybe RGW multi-site statistics as far as how much it's actually used, errored out counts compared to successful syncs. I mostly just don't have a solid grasp of how many people are actually using RGW multi-site and to what scale they're using it at.
So would it be fairly simple for a manager module to collect these? Are these exposed easily?
I think they're all already existing statistics. I just don't think they're collected for at least any public dashboards.
Yeah, I guess this step one would be to even infer how many RGW multi-site deployments are there. I don't know if that information is already there in telemetry, and that extends to any other asynchronous replication schemes that we have, snapshot-based mirroring and things like that. It kind of extends into the stretch mode question.
Yep, I'm not sure we're collecting anything specific on that, but I can double check. But if there's anything new from recent couple of releases, we probably do not collect that. I see you here. Maybe you can chime in and give us some more information on the subject.
Sorry, I'm pretty naive as to what telemetry itself is collecting there. There are some perf counters, but those aren't like persistent.
So let's say we want to determine how many users are using RGW multi-sites. So exactly what would be the right data to collect? So we don't have any false negatives or false positives in the data. And is this data available for manager module to collect?
If it could run Rados GW admin commands, I suppose it could discover what realms and zone groups and zones there are.
I'm not sure if that's possible. We'd have to check about that, because regular Ceph admin socket commands or any kind of regular Ceph command is fine. We've been able to use those, but I'm not sure about Rados GW.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, probably not, but we can double check. Do you know of any other manager module that used uses any of this information?
I know that Yehuda wrote some manager module that's related to deploying multi-site, and I think that probably it must run some of these commands. So I guess it's possible.
Okay, we'll check with him. Thanks.
This could be another case where it could be an inference from the performance counters, something that we did for blue store compression. Because if you don't have a multi-site cluster, certain performance counters are not expected to be populated. And I believe I heard that the dashboard teams are actually exposing some performance metrics. I may be wrong. Maybe that's something on their roadmap, but that may be one simple area to attack. And we already collect a bunch of performance metrics, but I know that's not for RGW. Maybe start collecting some useful performance counters there.
But will give us so those counters, will they let us know the scale, or like a binary? Do we use it or not use it?
I don't know. I'm just like, I'm just like thinking out loud that if, there are certain counters that are supposed to communicate sync rates and things like that, they won't be populated if it's not a multi-site cluster. So I think it's a question to ask the developers there and even look at some of those metrics.
Sure. Right, we'll sync up with them too. Any other comments on this suggested collection? All right, so we had a few topics we discussed last time, but I'm very curious if anyone else has any ideas of anything that is important that we should be collecting upstream before we move to that. So, for example, any features that you're working on that Telemetry can, pick some certain metric.
I think one thing that comes to mind based on the Blue Store CDS session, there was lack of information around how well different allocators are doing in the field versus what developers are doing theoretical tests around them, performance tests. So there was a to-do item to go look how well they capture those metrics and add more if needed. And the second part would be to expose them via telemetry so that we can get more information.
Okay, so they might add basically new metrics to we're talking about T, right? They're considering adding, exposing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So there is a plan to, so there's already a new allocator that is being added for Bluestone in the T release. And there were questions around that, whether that should be default or if users in the field are changing their allocator. By the way, that might be another question to answer, because we have a default of hybrid allocator, but there's in certain cases, developers have suggested moving back to a different allocator for a particular reason, but we don't really know what the footfall is in terms of default versus non-default. Maybe that's step one, and step two could be like, if somebody is switching an allocator, what metrics should we look at to see why it is not, why the default is not suitable, and therefore like also making the change in a future release to a different allocator that Igor is currently working on.
So there could be a metric that tells us why they switched, or I mean,
I mean, they could give us hints. I mean, like technically, why they switched could be a choice they made or a choice that a developer suggested, right?
Yeah.
Now, if it is a developer that made that decision for them, they already know why they made that.
Oh,
Now,
I see.
my question is to attack that in a different way to see if there's already information in telemetry that can tell us, because some people are not coming to us with tracker reports, right? So.
Right. Oh, okay. So whether it was automatic or did the user manually change it themselves?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because we always have a default that's usually we suggest not touching it, right? So.
Right. Now I thought maybe there was a bottleneck that a certain allocator could solve. So maybe maybe that could give even some more transparency. But yeah, but understanding whether it was automatically or manually changed, that's a good point.
Yeah, there's no automatic way. There may be a fallback or something that happens, but it never goes and automatically changes. Somebody has to go and change that setting. Now, the decision of that change, whether it's something that users thought that, hey, in a previous release, bitmap was just working fine for me, so I'll go back and use bitmap, right? That could be one use case that I can see. But I'm more interested in like data around allocators that we can go look at and draw inferences.
Sounds good. So there's a proposal or a design for new metrics for T, and yeah, we should understand exactly the relations between them. Yeah, and collect that to have some answers for that. And this is something that we will not be able to backport, for example.
Yeah, so I mean the essential to do from that meeting was that to even go look at existing metrics. So there could be two categories, right? That certain things are already there that we can start collecting, and certain things will be, of course, starting from T.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So if there is already data that we can collect from previous releases, we should collect that in a way that it'll be easy to backport. Just that, to have some more information from even Quincy and Reef and Squid. Okay, so one thing I wanted to bring up in case there are no other ideas or suggestions, or we can discuss that afterwards. So one thing that users asked was to have some analysis on the telemetry that they're sending. And this is something that we talked about in the past. What simple blueprint we can have to look at the basic setting and let the user know whether something is wrong with their deployment or have any suggestions. So I wanted to resurrect this discussion and see if anyone has any suggestion of how we can take that forward.
So I guess my question is, would it be something that we would it make sense to have like more personal analysis on available on the telemetry webpage or the Grafana through Grafana, or would it make more sense to have some kind of telemetry command like Ceph telemetry analysis or something to dump out an analysis report about certain things?
Yeah, it's a great question. In my opinion, it's better than that we run it on the server side, because if we decide to change anything, let's say we now discover that, oh, we should actually look at those 3 metrics in order to infer something. Once it's in the product, it's a lot more difficult to change that. They'll need to upgrade. But if it's on the server side, we can just run the new model, and that's a lot easier. And then we can either implement some sort of a callback, or in the public dashboard have a link for the user to go and check recommendations. The main problem or challenge here is to understand exactly what we should look at and draw a conclusion. Things look good, or actually it's better to move a couple of OSDs to host number 3, for example. I wonder if with the, I can't remember, someone mentioned that they're looking into an AI project to do exactly that. Might be one of the Ceph days.
Plisso made a tool for like doing analysis of like a Ceph dump of just all of your configs and then spitting out recommendations from that. I don't know the mechanism that actually does that, but they made a tool for that. I think it came out like 2-3 weeks ago.
I missed the first part. Who was working on that?
Plisso, so like Mark Nelson's group. And
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah, it was like a report that got generated off of, I don't know what they exactly collected to generate those reports, but they provided some basic recommendations from the cluster.
Okay, so this is something that is like a standalone tool that they can ask the user to run?
I think so.
Yep.
I only saw it in passing. See if I can find it. I would imagine it is probably something they built for their customers, of course, but that's the page for it.
Thank you. Oh, I see. They're using Ceph report.
Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. and then probably just internal logic that they've made for the clusters they manage, and then spit out the report based on that.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is with Ceph report is that it has some sensitive information that
Yeah.
We cannot share in telemetry. Everything is anonymized, and we remove any sensitive details. So, but if we understand exactly what we need to generate a recommendation, we can anonymize that as well. It's not a problem.
There's something I'm seeing that looks up in telemetry scope, checking for severe bugs in the running version. And we already collect in the crash channel any kind of bugs or crashes that the user has experienced. So if that maps to, I'm not sure how that logic decides like a severe bug, but if something is marked urgent, certainly that would count as a severe bug, and we could make sure that users are aware, or at the very least, what telemetry already does in updating the Redmine with trackers. That's a way for users to get more information about, has there been any progress done on these trackers? So some kind of analysis report could say, hey, you experienced these 7 crashes. Here are the trackers. This one looks particularly urgent. See the tracker for more details, something like that.
Yeah, definitely. That was also one ask from users to understand whether there has been any progress with crashes that were reported. Yes, so this goes back to how we communicate that back to the user, and yeah, we already have the infrastructure for the X-ray page on the public dashboards that users can basically put their cluster ID there, which is their telemetry cluster ID. It's not their FSID. And right now we do have a few panels there, and we wanted to add another layer of security to expose some deeper analysis on the data that they're reporting.
Yeah, and an extension of this that I can think of is beyond doing a check for the current version and the current cluster, do an analysis report based on telemetry of a version that a user is interested to upgrade to. Because a lot of users don't know and just see something and they get afraid, and then they don't adopt that particular version. But if there is like a report that telemetry could indicate, like, go to this 17:5 page and see how many severe issues are there in this, what has the adoption been like, how large are those clusters, that kind of gives more confidence to users based on data across across the field to see whether it's advisable to upgrade to that release.
Yeah, that's also a great point. So do we have, besides release notes, a centralized database for all those upgrade paths? So we know that it's safe to run the Quincy squid, for example, or like the certain point releases, or maybe it's easier to just put there what's unsafe to run. Is there
It's
some more?
common knowledge. N-2 is common knowledge, I think, in the community. So there's, I mean, more recently, I've never seen issues because somebody's just done an upgrade to N+3. So yeah, I mean, whatever version they're running, if they want to upgrade, they go to the next version's highest point release, right? Because that's the one that's got most number of fixes.
But yeah, so
I guess to simplify, ideally all N-2 upgrades are valid. There may be some, corner cases where the particular release has been buggy for a certain application or certain reason. Those are not made obvious. They are currently just communicated via documentation beyond even release notes and announcements.
so when the user, let's say that they're upgrading with the orchestrator, do we have any guardrails there to protect them from that?
So you mean like if somebody wants to upgrade directly from Pacific to Squid?
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't allow you to do that. I haven't checked recently, but there should be some guardrails around it. But yeah, we can double check.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're doing this already, but I don't remember. I think we had a failure in one of the tests that did not allow us to run that kind of upgrade. So going back to the recommendations that we can generate with telemetry, like the added value. So now you suggested to take a look at the deployment and understand the character of the upgrade, whether
so I think there are two ways, right? Like two ways to look at it. One is like, what are the recommendations I need if I want to continue running this version in production for another year or so? Am I affected by any bugs? So that I think the tool that was just shared is kind of doing that. Now, what I was thinking of, this is definitely useful, right? Because maybe certain settings that you have are detrimental to the long running usage of your cluster, and you better change it sooner rather than later. Example is like OSD memory target, number of scubs running in parallel, things like that. Then the second part is about getting more confidence in upgrades from user point of view, and not just relying on like one or two data points in terms of communication in user list, for example. So that is just more like um, I guess it's not for immediate usage, but it's like, okay, I'll start monitoring this release in telemetry and see how the adoption is increasing. And once I feel like I'm confident, I then go upgrade. Currently, it happens by word of mouth or like just seeing the number of issues and discussions coming up in the mailing lists. I mean, the users here can definitely chime in. I mean, I'm just kind of painting a picture of what I think is happening.
Yeah. How would that be different from the queries that we can run right now? Like how many clusters are on, on the Squid RC? Because we can do that now. Is there something beyond that we would need to be done for this?
It is going to use the same information. It's just going to make it more like, it's going to be like one click button, right? You just click on this and see like telemetry report on this particular release. It would just not be number of clusters. It would be like number of urgent bugs that are open against that. Things like that. So it's like a full picture of like that particular release, something that we kind of go and infer ourselves, when we get curious.
Makes sense.
Well, I think, yeah, we can even make it smarter. For example, let's say there are several urgent bugs, but it could be irrelevant for the current deployment. Let's say it's a certain component that has most of the bugs. I'm just thinking out loud. So we should let the user know maybe they're not using this component at all. So they can maybe be concerned to upgrade to that version, but at the end of the day, it doesn't affect them.
Yep, a filter out kind of feature, right? Like a filter. It could just not be application also. It could be like modules. A lot of the bugs that get introduced in manager modules, some people don't even use them. So they shouldn't worry about it if they don't use it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, so some more analysis on how stable that release is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe in general it would be good to like define how what is a stable release. So it will be easier to calculate that score in that sense. I guess, yeah, I guess crashes and bugs is a pretty good proxy for that.
And security related issues, right? That's another major concern that users have.
Right. Yep. Oh, wow. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. Is there anything else anyone wants to discuss? Any comments? Any ideas? All right. So thanks everyone for joining. It has been a good session, good brainstorming. We'll continue the discussion in the next user dev meeting. Yeah, and if there's anything that comes to mind, please reach out to us. We have the huddle as well, so you know where to find us. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jorge.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, bye.